Hello, Internet, and welcome to another episode of Meet la Prensa. This is actually an informal episode, a chat that we're going to have between me and Ivan in the control room. So if you like what you see here, if you find value, make sure you like and subscribe, and you can find our social media handles now in the description to this video. So Ivan, great to see you. We've been working all morning on overlays and graphics and different types of motion that we can add to videos like the one we're recording right now. So
that is true. We have been working all morning, so that's good.
So Ivan, tell us, what did you just read? Because I think one of the things that we need to tell the audience about today is Congress. Like all of a sudden we're in Congress, you know what I mean? Before we were interviewing kind of like our friends on just remotely talking about the news of the day. Now we're actually in the room where it happens during the news of the day, where I asked House Speaker Nancy Pelosi this.
So Senator Ossoff says that he'll be looking into allegations of sexual misconduct by members of Congress against night shift custodians who clean the Capitol complex. What is Congress's responsibility to protect the custodians who clean these buildings?
In terms of your second question, the chair of the House Administration Committee will be meeting with both the architect and the inspector general, and we'll look forward to seeing the report on any progress in this area. We don't have any place here for any question in terms of the safety in every sense of the word for our workers in the Capitol.
The reason I asked Nancy Pelosi that question is because it started with a 2017 article by Erin Bacon in CQ magazine. I just shared that article with you. What's your reaction?
Well, I think, like I said, the first thing I mentioned to you is like, why didn't this get so much more reporting that, the general public would know about? I mean, it was just kind of, as I read the story.
What was the story? Just so the audience.
Well, the story is about sexual harassment, that goes on in the halls of Congress, not only by congressional staff members, but also by, I'm assuming, it's in the way they kind of mentioned it, by actually elected officials. I mean, they were talking about a few that resigned, a couple that didn't get reelected. But more importantly, as I was talking to you, the fact that some of these resolutions are done with taxpayer dollars. It's like I'm paying for
the sexual harassment settlements.
Yeah, the settlements and sexual harassment cases
paid for by tax, like the sexual harassment settlements in Congress for sexual harassment that goes on like in the halls of power gets paid out by the taxpayer.
Yeah, that's just I know the story's 3 years old, but in my mind I'm like, wow, that's just talk about a slush fund.
Yeah. The thing is sort of what we were talking about before. It seems that the Hill staffer, the Capitol Hill staffer, the person who works for the taxpayer in Congress, for you and me, they have three options if they see or experience an episode of sexual misconduct by someone in the building, including their own colleagues, including their bosses, is that they can keep silent, and that seems to be, if you read Erin's story, at least in 2017, that seemed to be the status quo. It's just like, if it happens to you, be silent because it'll end your career. If you go forward, if you come forth with, or if you make public, or even just make the complaint internally, the people are told, the survivors of sexual misconduct are told your career is over. So the second option is to go to the Office of Compliance, which is a black box in essence, where complaints go to die in forced arbitration by a bunch of private sector lawyers that sit on an advisory board. So the third option, which never really gets exercised, interestingly enough, and doesn't get mentioned in the story, is to go to the press, right? So one of the reasons why I asked Nancy Pelosi that question on Thursday at her press conference was, I knew my audience obviously was every Hill office on Capitol Hill watching the speaker's press conference. And I want to know who was sexually, in the instances described in this 2019 IG report, Inspector General report that I mentioned when in the question to the speaker, I want to know who were the survivors of that misconduct by congressmen against custodians. And the reason why that's so important to me is because my father was a custodian for many years growing up. We're from South America. So, that was a story that when the IG report, the Inspector General report, was published in March of 2019, so 2 years ago, the Ides of March, actually, in 2019. From that moment on, I was just kind of obsessed with this story. Like, I want to get to the bottom of it. And I think that there are levers that exist that can get to the bottom of it. And, you know, then the public will have its opportunity to hold whoever perpetrated this misconduct accountable.
I guess, you know, no, and that's good that you asked the question, because as I was reading the article, and they had some pretty graphic examples in terms of some of the things that some of these, you know, complaint folks that were filing the complaints were describing. And it just, how do I put it? As I just, like, as I mentioned earlier to you too, it's that I feel like you got a bunch of these powerful men, that
Old
probably,
white guys,
a bunch of
in
old
many
white
cases.
guys, you know, many cases, that have this power. And it's just kind of, it's like dirty old men going in there harassing these young, you know, intern staffers, you know, even to the point where they're harassing the janitorial staff. I mean, most of this, and I mean, I'd venture to say that most of the janitorial staff is probably Latino at some level, or a
Some of
lot of
them
it
are.
is.
Some of them are.
But still, regardless
They're,
of regardless if they're Latino or not, at the end of the day, it's like
the scope of the complaint, though, which I think is important for the viewer to understand, is limited to architect of the Capitol employees on the night shift custodian.
Yeah.
It's particularly on the night shift. So it's not limited to just that, but particularly on the night shift.
Yeah.
So the challenge from a journalistic perspective then becomes, like, obviously you could go through every member like I'm doing and just saying, hey, where do you stand on your janitors? You know?
Yeah.
Like, custodians, how do they matter to you?
Well, let me ask you a question on
go
that
to the
front.
custodians. Sorry,
well,
go ahead.
Well,
Yeah.
let me ask you a question on that front. I mean, you know, definitely we can go and ask every congressional, you know, elected official where they stand on that, but I'm genuinely curious, like, where the American people stand on it, because
Go ahead.
if we, I mean, this is a 3-year-old story. The IG report just came out in 2019, which is just a couple of years ago, and now it's like I'm reading this for the first time. I mean, I don't recall, and I'm a pretty voracious, you know, consumer of news.
Sure.
You know, that you and I are just always talking about that even before we started our channel. But for me not to be able to know that that existed, it's kind of like, wow, like where was the story? It's like I kind of think back of those West Wing episodes, or you know, or with Donald Trump administration. Like, was this like a Friday night filing story that just got thrown out on a Friday night when no one's paying attention? And
it actually was. It was. If you look up March 9th, I'm virtually certain. If you look up March 19th, 2019, I'm going to do that real quick. I'm pretty sure that was.
If it's a Friday, it makes sense then. I mean, I'm curious now.
March 15, 2019.
What comes up?
What day was?
Now the suspense is killing me.
Friday, of course.
Oh, there you go.
Of course, it was a Friday news dump. Yeah. So, viewer, if you don't know what a Friday news dump is, a Friday news dump is a technique that a lot of public relations officials who are in-house, say in like a congressional office or a company or what have you, late on a Friday afternoon after the reporters have been working all week, they dump their most like toxic public information. So it's like, you know, in this case, the toxic information is that members of Congress have been there are allegations of sexual misconduct against sitting Congress people, which wouldn't surprise anyone. But the reason why I think it's an important story, Ivan, and I think it like resonates beyond, you know, it is a 3-year-old IG report, as you say, isn't because it's members of Congress sexually misconducting themselves. That's a tale as old as time too, but a tale even older than time in any institution, right? Every institution has it, and human history has its custodians. The people have to clean up after the meeting, right? So the janitor's story, I think that why the American people will care is because it wasn't hidden from them per se when it was into a Friday news dump, but it certainly wasn't followed up on. Now we're following up on it, and we're following up on it for real. So, but I think the reason why it'll resonate not just with like American readers everywhere is because custodians are also like, it's one of the world's older professions. And as soon as you build a temple, as soon as you put some rocks like together, You need somebody to just kind of take care of it, keep it clean. So the people who take care of our temple of democracy, if you will, are the janitors, the custodians, and they push the cart on the night shift through marble halls the same way janitors push the cart on the night shift through cubicles, through factories, through every place in the United States where people there's been an active workplace during the day. There's a nighttime.
Hold that
Yeah.
thought, dude. On that point alone, as I read the story, I mean, the laws that are in place for corporate America to follow are not being followed, and they're not even required to be followed by members of Congress or the congressional staff. It's like they're living in two different legal worlds. It's
do
like,
as I say, not as I do.
Absolutely. Like you and I can go get a job at a corporation and we got to abide by laws and the rules and everything, but those same rules and laws don't apply to these members of Congress and congressional staff or anyone that works in the Hill. And I think one of the things that stood out in the story too was it was a quote by Jackie Spear, who, by the way, one of my friends that lives in San Francisco, used to work on her staff when she was a state representative in California years ago. And she had said that, one of the reasons people don't, and I'm paraphrasing, one of the reasons people don't complain is because they know that once you complain, you're pretty much writing your own pink slip. And like, you're pretty much done. And like, and I know, and that those janitorial jobs, they're probably not high paying jobs, but the people that have those jobs probably need those jobs more so than the average American because they need to put food on the table. So of course it's going to probably put some of those individuals, especially the janitorial folks. I mean, not to, of course, also the congressional interns and that were mentioned in the story that are being harassed by the staff members. I think one of the examples was also Mark Meadows, as a former chief of staff, was harassing the girls in his office, and he kept them on staff, paying him whether he was on staff or not. They couldn't figure out if he was fired, but he was no longer in the office. But one of the things I mentioned is
an interesting thing about that story is that it was Mark Meadows who would later go on to be Donald Trump's chief of staff.
Oh, absolutely.
The story was written long before that, but
exactly. But one of the things that he mentioned is like the staffers would tell new female staffers, quote unquote, don't wear your hair in a ponytail because this guy West, I forgot his first name, this guy West, the chief of staff, likes to pull on girls' hair. And like, just it's like I'm like, wait a sec. It's like, yeah, and I'm like, wait a second. It's like it's like, if that even if the fact that they know that he likes to do that, and they would tell other future staffers or new employees that would come on, female employees, not to wear their hair in a ponytail because that's his character, his demeanor, the things that he does. It's like, wait, if he does that, why is he working there? It's because he's a rich, powerful white guy who's the chief of staff for Mark Meadows, and I'm assuming Mark Meadows at the time was probably a senior,
powerful white guy too.
Well, he was in the senior leadership of the House of Representatives, the Republicans. So, what I find interesting, and granted, there was a Democrat that was mentioned there as well. I think it goes on both sides, but yeah, I want to say real
quick, just a quick note. You mentioned that in the story they talked about the Hill staffer that would go around. They told women to wear their hair a certain way because of his tendency to go and play with their hair, grab their hair. Lori Lissaraga actually had an experience, I don't know if you recall from her essay, of like being told not to wear a side bun. I don't think it was because nobody was going to grab it or something like that, but still there is like this, I think, misconduct, as defined now, as opposed to when Erin's story went live in 2017, would include obviously anyone telling women how they should wear their hair needs to stay in their lane. You know what I mean? So that's also kind of like a promising change between when this Capitol Hill story started out being investigated to now, as we carry on the investigation this week in Congress.
But like on Thursday when you asked Speaker Pelosi the question about what her stance was, I mean, for lack of a better word, I mean, 2017, we had a lot of, female elected officials in the House of Representatives. I don't know how many were in the Senate at the time, but it's like, how can these women, I mean, not like band together even harder to try to get these, allegations or these things out in the public? So we got to clean. It's like, we got to clean house, man.
I think it's
no pun intended, of course.
Clean house. That's a triple pun, actually, because House of
Actually,
Representatives and also cleaning house, like
there
house
you go.
cleaning, housekeeping. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well played. No, I think that like the most important thing about, to answer your question though, I think that women actually have banded together really well. Like I think that like there are groups that are organized and there are groups that disorganized, that at least from a Capitol Hill perspective, like a Washington perspective, because it's a place where lobbies of all shapes and sizes and all ideologies and all representing all different kinds of special interests, and women are certainly a special interest, right?
Yeah.
Are there and I think that like in just my time here, the amount of political firepower that they bring to the table has increased precipitously since I remember when I arrived in DC in around 2009. You know, there were powerful women, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that women were powerful in Washington. Right. I would say that women are certainly powerful in Washington at this point. There's an article by Kate Ackley in Roll Call. It was a CQ cover story as well. CQ magazine, just best in the business. But it showed that, like, I believe it was the 2018 midterm. During the 2018 midterm, women started flexing as never before as political donors. And so I think one of the reasons why we see now.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
I got a question. I mean, not as you're talking about that. So this article, I'm pulling it up real quick, was written by Erin Bacon on February 2nd, 2017. So my question is, like, what's Erin Bacon up to these days? Like, how many more follow-up articles does she write about this? Because seriously, this couldn't have just been a one and done article, I hope.
Well, the interesting thing about Erin's article is that, first of all, I know I was told when I was because I used to work at Roll Call, and I started at the newsroom that produced that incredible journalism about, like, I don't know, 6 months afterwards, 8 months afterwards. I think that article ran in January and I started in October. So that article kind of predated the Harvey Weinstein story.
Yeah.
You know? And while it didn't really have a huge impact on, like, that people in Congress, there was sexual misconduct in Congress, it didn't necessarily have a huge impact upon, like, the public discourse, if you will. But on Capitol Hill, the day that story came out and the magazines went out around Capitol Hill, you couldn't get a copy. Everybody remembers that day. It's just like you could not find a copy of CQ. They just disappeared. And usually, like, when you walk around Capitol Hill, every newspaper company drops off, like, you know, a couple hundred newspapers to the Congress, right? And that was, you know.
So was it you couldn't find a copy because everybody wanted to read it?
Right. Or everybody's like, oh, really? Because you wonder, when somebody like this chief of staff for Mark Meadows, or the person mentioned in the article, like, is playing with your hair and stuff like that, at some level, you're just like, well, who do I need to talk to about this? Because, like, if I've already talked to my boss and they're like, deal with it, it's like, no, you know? And the answer, unfortunately, becomes the Office of Compliance. The Office of Compliance being the black box where forced arbitration makes sexual misconduct complaints die.
But it also
with no accountability.
It also said in the article, to Jackie Spears' earlier point about the, you know, writing your own pink slip, if you go to the Office of Compliance and you make a complaint there, they're pretty much going to tag you as unhireable anywhere in the halls of Congress again. So it's like you basically have to just, like, you know, suck it up. And, you know, if you want to keep your job, which is such BS, man. I mean, on so many levels.
Yeah. It's an important topic that we're following up on now. That's the hopeful thing about it. It's just like, you know, I think that, like, the reason why it wasn't followed up on wasn't really nefarious. It was more like, this is one line in an architect of the Capitol IG report. We get hundreds, thousands of reports every week if you're a Capitol newsroom. And while an interesting story, the task of covering it requires some expertise on how the janitors work on the night shift. So, yeah, that I think that it wasn't followed up on because it's a needle in the haystack story. But when me covering Congress for Latino Rebels, like, it's a Latino and I feel like it's a good story for an aspiring congressional, like,
Reporter.
aspiring excellent congressional correspondent to break, so and here's what we know. I think it seems that the oversight committee, the Senate Rules Committee, and the Senate Investigations Committee, and again, there might be other committees, but these three committee chair people seem to have access to the black box that in Erin's article. So John Ossoff is the head of the Investigations Committee. So when I saw him at the Senate on Tuesday morning,
yeah, you asked him a question, didn't you?
Actually, Tuesday afternoon. Yeah, it was like 1:30 in the afternoon on Tuesday, and I asked him. I said, hey, so there's an IG report from 2019. Senator Ossoff, there's an IG report from 2019 that says there's misconduct on the night shift. And he said, yeah, this is the first time hearing of it, but I will look into it. My staff will follow up with you. So I emailed his staff 5 times since. And I told him basically, like, I look forward to seeing your boss next week, because.
Have you heard back from them when you've emailed them?
Yeah, they said, look, they said basically, like, look, and this was like Friday, that it's been a really busy week. You know what I mean? So I think that what they mean by that is that he hasn't read it yet. It is a 54-page report that totally buries the lead on page 32.
Yeah.
But over the weekend, I have been sending them that report, and I'll follow up with the page 32 like this afternoon, just so that it's like, come Monday, it's game on. I'm being fair with them. Like, you know what I mean? I've pointed them toward what I'm talking about with their boss every time I see him from now on. And I am going to talk to it with his boss every time I see him from now on, because I want to know and my question is simple. It's like, as chair of the Senate Investigations Committee, are these misconduct allegations against members, the misconduct against custodians by members, are these allegations serious enough to warrant investigation by your committee? And if he says yes, and it launches a committee investigation, then obviously, like, they do have the power and the authority to open up that Office of Compliance black box.
I wonder what about like following up? I mean, I know it's almost 3 years now, actually 4 years now, since it was in February of 2017. So
that was just a story.
Yeah, that was just a story, right?
The story in 2017.
But the quotes, hold on, the quotes
or 2019.
Yeah, but the quotes from Representative Spear from 2017, I would love to find out and go to her and just ask her, like, hey, I mean, I'm following up on this IG report. I'm wondering, like, what have you seen as a member of Congress since 2017? The complaints probably didn't just stop overnight. They're still coming in, probably.
No, there are several Congress people that I want to talk to about this week. Jackie Spear is certainly on the list. Zoe Lofgren is obviously at the top of that list, because she is the person who Nancy Pelosi assigned the comment to as chair of the House Administration Committee. So Nancy Pelosi ordered, to be clear, like, Nancy Pelosi ordered Zoe Lofgren, the chair of the House Admins Committee. Actually, I don't even know if it's accurate to say she said this is what's happening. Nancy Pelosi said this is what's happening. Zoe Lofgren is meeting with the architect of the Capitol and the architect of the Capitol's Inspector General's office, and I look forward to seeing the report. Now, at first, I actually thought, when she said I look forward to seeing the report, that she had commissioned a new report, right? But Julio pointed out, which I think Julio's right. I think I was actually wrong. What she meant was the current report, the 2019 report, So yeah, but we wrote it up Julio's way. That's why it's important to have great editors. You know what I mean? It's like, because my hearing of those words, while factual, like, it wasn't. It's hard to say, because I won't be able to talk to Nancy Pelosi again until next Thursday, when she has another presser, and that'll be after the address that Joe Biden's giving on Wednesday night at 9.
Which we'll be covering live stream on Wednesday at 9 o'clock. So
with some special guests. Stay tuned.
Yeah. So hopefully you can join us.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. I got to tell you, thank you for sharing the article. I mean, I know we were just chatting earlier, and as I was reading it, my brain was like, wow, it's like, it just feels like obviously a Friday news dump, situation. But more importantly, it was just like, man, it's unfortunate that people that can easily be taken advantage of and really don't have a loud enough voice are taken advantage of by people that are supposedly here to represent us as Americans, and they're just taking advantage of the situation. But hey, keep following up, man. I'd love to see what comes of this, because at the end of the day, if there, I can't imagine that there's people in office, staffers, elected officials that are just all of a sudden stopped being I mean, look at what's going on with Matt Gaetz. I mean, this guy just got elected, and this guy's a walking time bomb of just just a dirt
Bravo.
bag, just a dirt bag. I mean, but still, I mean, hey, cover it. I'm looking forward to seeing more what you find out. At the end of the day, I'm glad you asked the question, so kudos to you. And by the way, congratulations for being in that press conference. I know I've known you a long time, Pablo, and you worked hard, and you finally got in the room where it happens, which is awesome.
I think that they deserve a congratulations too, because I was there.
Yeah. So it's good.
No, I'm kidding.
So,
no, it's the people's room, it's the people's building, it's the people's press conference. We have through the back, like through the we've gone through the processes of getting a congressional press pass. And now the responsibility, like the sacred trust that the First Amendment puts in us as press, is to cover the story in a way that's dignified of the building. But that doesn't mean taking people's shit either. Like that means that, like to us now, as you continue to read into it, viewer, as you continue to see us cover it, the investment into this Custodians of Congress story that we're working on becomes more and more important. And, we're going to become more and more passionate about it, but there is decorum, and like, what I mean? Like we're doing a good job. We're doing good professional journalism. We don't have training in this necessarily, like not a whole lot of training, but we have really great friends. A lot of them have been on the show who are helping us along the way. So, that's what it's all about. Like, this YouTube channel is awesome. Like, I love it. I love all of our 106 subscribers, right?
So do I. I've been having a lot of fun, building it with you, Pablo. And I think hopefully as we continue to build it and we become more and more proficient with not only the journalistic side of it, but also the production side of it, we'll continue to get better. But, I just love the fact that, at least we're getting out there, and, it all starts with like just maybe one voice, and then it goes from there, and then we can kind of build. And you're right. We've had a lot of your friends and people that you've known over the years that have been very kind and helping us, kind of guiding us through some of the processes of how to kind of get the pass, congressional pass, but also just giving us the opportunity to work with us. And I'm looking forward to continuing to do that. So, but anyways, look, man, I tell you, keep doing what you're doing. I love it.
You too, man.
I'm
well
glad
done.
I'm glad you and I.
You've gone from.
Well, hold on. I'm glad you and I went in February from how we started the channel to like, well, no one's covering Rafa's story, and we're like, let's just do it ourselves. And here we are, and we just, we did it, and it's been a nice learning curve. We're becoming editors, we're becoming graphic designers, we're becoming journalists. I'm still trying to get find my beat, things that I want to kind of cover, and maybe do some writing along the way down the road. But right now it's one foot in front of the other, and we'll keep going, man.
Agreed. No, this is going to be great. And this week is going to be really interesting too, because we have access to like a major media event, where every network in the country is going to be there, including us,
including MEET la PRENSA.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm glad Latino Rebels,
South America right here.
Yeah.
We'll be able to see us.
And I'll tell you what, it's going to be MEET la PRENSA going live from President Biden's speech to Congress. But also, we're very, lucky.
And Pablo live in the Capitol, right underneath that dome where it's happening. I'll be there.
Pablo live in the Capitol, but also just like the having the opportunity to work with people like Julio over at Latino Rebels, that is giving us the opportunity to, trusting in us to do a good job. So kudos to them, and I'm really encouraged by the partnership we have with them and collaboration that we're doing. So.
No, Julio is definitely one of the most underrated people in the American newsroom, because honestly, and so are we, obviously. Underrated is how
I wouldn't even call us underrated. We're like unknown. But as I was saying, we may be unknowns. Eventually we'll be underrated, but we'll keep moving up that ladder. and we'll keep doing some good work. And yeah, I can't wait to do our live stream and on Wednesday evening to kind of cover that. Hopefully it goes without a hitch.
Yeah, man. And thank you to Julio, Ricardo Varela, and the rest of the internet for believing in us so far. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your suggestions. Thank you for teaching us, especially Ivan, who's really, really active in these chats now, on how to make graphic design, how to make elements, how to make motion. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Like, this project is important. We look forward to seeing you at the Capitol on Wednesday.
And don't forget to like and subscribe and follow us on YouTube. For now, as you say, what do you say?
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Ah.